Hello, Satanico here once again for Godlovescomics, and today I've got a small unboxing video, probably a little bit over a half dozen comics. I ordered these from the same dealer who I purchased the Batman lot the last time, with mostly Don Newton art, and these are much earlier batch, very early Bronze Age, very late Silver Age, and primarily I was looking for this one specific artist who I'll talk a little bit more about once I open the package. Here it is right here. Just the run-of-the-mill priority mail, but let's crack this open and see what we got. And I think it's pretty good. Not all of these are in the best of shape. I think we're mostly talking very good to fine. Some of the fine are in the best shape, and let's get a few of those. Okay, with these, wow, this seal on the corner of this box, on the end of these boxes, is very difficult right now. I'm going to have to tear into it if I can. Okay, here we go. And we've got some of that stuff, Oops. And this little briquette. It's in a Target bag. That's fine. And of course, everything's bagged and boarded. And there we go. That's what we're looking at. Not very many. But it's about quality, not quantity. So the first one is Detective number 425. And that's already pretty exciting. Nice cover. Oh, okay. I had actually forgotten I ordered this one. This is a Bernie Wrightson cover. That explains why it's so nice. See it right down here, Bernie Wrightson's signature, if you can see right there, from 1972. Bernie Wrightson just passed away. He's probably the premier horror comics artist of the Silver Age. His work is just, it has an incredible elegance to it, but it also is very genuinely creepy and scary. Not probably as over-the-top horrific as some of the EC artists, or is ghoulish in a sense. There was a very sort of romantic beauty to his line, to his style. He did a lot of incredibly beautiful work for magazines, particularly in the black and white magazines of like Creepy and Eerie, the Warren magazines, and of course classically did Swamp Thing, this sort of first run well before Alan Moore came along and sort of resuscitated it after it had sort of fallen into disrepair when Wrightson had left. So that's why I bought this, for the Bernie Wrightson cover, and I'm pretty sure it has some pretty good stuff inside too, so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And this is close to one of the crown jewels here, number 416. Let me pull up my file to be reminded of what I paid for these, by the way, just purely out of interest. Okay, number 416 is not bad. That's because this is a Neal Adams cover, I do believe, and Man-Bat. So Man-Bat, I think, made his first appearance in Detective Comics number 400, and that issue is running in fine for around $500. So this is well after that, obviously. This is 416, but all of the issues where Man-Bat appears, particularly which were drawn by Neal Adams, or the covers are by Neal Adams, are pretty collectible. So this one was $9 in Fine Plus, and so that's not bad. And let's see if I can pull up how much it's going for now. This is $4.16. So taking a look at my comic shop, oh yeah, okay, this looks pretty good. Now, I think they certainly overprice things, and a lot of things are consignment, which are just randomly priced by people who send in their stuff. But this is a comic that was just almost too good to pass up. It's listed as very fine plus, and that looks somewhat legitimate. I see, obviously see some obvious flaws. There is a crease in the corner, it looks like. There's a little bit of it's hard to tell if that's the bag, but I think it's the actual comic. A little bit of a dent there, a little bit of a mark in the corner, but obviously it's a well presented cover, still a really nice cover. And this sells, the top price on my comic shop is for $74 for a very fine. So to pick this up for $9, obviously $74, no one's buying it for that. I see a $45 issue for 6.5, and even in very good, they're uniformly selling for $21, $23, $23, and very good 4.0. So, and there's a fine listed at 5.5 for $59. So anyway, slice it, $9 for this comic is a really good deal. And aside from that, just the comic itself, it's a really nice looking comic, great cover, love the color, and sort of classic Neal Adams, so very happy with that. And this is another classic. This is really one of my favorites, one that I've seen many times, this cover with Enemy Ace, and really an homage to some degree to Joe Kubert. Neal Adams has said that before. Joe Kubert does an amazing cover with this character, and so Adams sort of does an homage to Kubert, but obviously still maintains his own style, which is kind of a hard style to define. I mean, it's easily defined as very naturalistic, but there's nothing that really jumps out. I mean, you easily recognize Joe Kubert, you easily recognize Gil Kane. Neal Adams, you recognize, but it's kind of hard to put your finger on exactly why. But regardless of that, again, I really love the colors here. Just this red backdrop and, the green, and then obviously the composition with Batman coming out of the plane. So, yeah, it's really nice. And even all of this little ephemera that they put from the little Batgirl, the little Batman, the logo, it's all pretty fun. 15-cent comics. Can't beat them. Pretty exciting. And okay, and here's another really good one, $3.94. And oh, by the way, let's keep taking a look at the prices as well. Let's see how much I paid for this. $4.04 was okay. This was the most expensive one out of the batch that I purchased, and it was still only $17. But for what is listed as a fine, and it looks like a legitimate fine. It's a really nice cover. It obviously, once again, has a little bit of damage in the corners, but relatively minimal, pretty flat, some spine ticks, pretty much everything you would expect from a fine comic. And this one actually, again, I think is pretty valuable, pretty well priced online. And let's see. Okay, so at least at my comic shop, their highest graded copy is very good at 4.0 for $24. Then they have a good at 3.0 for $18, and they have a consignment issue that is listed at very fine 8.5 for $275. Now, once again, I mean, these are only worth what somebody's willing to pay for them. I don't think anybody's going to buy this issue, at least at the current time, for $275. You can probably go on eBay and find it for significantly less. But I think you would be definitely, you're going to get more than $17 for it for the most part. This is probably a $40 comic at the least in fine condition, but I would say you could probably easily get 60, maybe 75 for it, maybe more. Depends how much somebody wants something. Obviously, condition is optimal, and this one has a pretty entertaining storyline in it as well. Plus, a big draw for this issue is that Neal Adams did the cover, but also he did the interior pencils for this particular story. And most of these have multiple stories in them, and I'm quite interested in this issue. I'll crack it open shortly, but it's covered by Neal Adams, Ghost of the Killer Skies, script by Denny O'Neil, pencils by Neal Adams, inks by Dick Giordano. When murder breaks out on a World War I movie set devoted to the story of Rittmeister Hans von Hammer, that's him. It features enemy ace. But, let's see, the enemy ace, Batman, investigates and finds a modern-day Von Hammer devoted to keeping the original's memory untarnished in his own eyes. Then there's a story by Frank Robbins, who I didn't even know that Frank Robbins was a writer for Detective Comics. I think most collectors from the Bronze Age remember Frank Robbins primarily as the artist of The Invaders, where, as I said, you always kind of got the bait and switch, where you would get pretty often a really great Jack Kirby cover, and then the interiors would be Frank Robbins, which is a pretty jarring transition. But those were the kind of bait and switch sort of transitions you were used to, especially in the Bronze Age. Anyway, this other story is Midnight Doom Boy, which is a really good title, by Frank Robbins, with pencils by Gil Kane, which I'm pretty excited about, and inks by Frank Gaioshia. Always have trouble being certain what the pronunciation of his name is, even though he's done millions of, seemingly every other comic, like a lot of the incredible workhorses in the Bronze Age and Silver Age. When a police surveillance film showing Jason Bard murdering X-rated film director Billy Warlock, the criminologist is arrested. Although the evidence shows that Bard killed Warlock, Barbara Gordon believes that Bard is innocent of the crime and begins launching her own investigation as Batgirl. So that's pretty entertaining already. That's a pretty good hook. And interestingly, there's a lot of the letters page supposedly has a lot of pretty famous writers who wrote in at the time. Marty Pasco, Alan Brennert, who ended up writing some Batman. I think he wrote at least one of the stories for, was it Detective 500 or Batman 500? I'm not sure. And Mike W. Barr, who is pretty well known as well. I think Mike W. Barr, I know him best for writing Camelot 3000 with Brian Boland. So anyway, and I'll talk a little bit more about that character as well. Jason Bard. I have the first appearance of him in one of these comics. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly which one. Maybe it'll come up. I don't think it's this one, but I've never heard of him. I'm not that well steeped in detective, but pretty interesting. And the idea that a story would revolve around someone murdering an X-rated film director in a Comics Code cover. I mean, whether they call him a smut peddler and that's just the X-rated is just obviously implied, or whether I actually specify these X-rated is kind of one way or the other. It's a little bit surprising for the Comics Code era. And this is another really nice cover, obviously another Neal Adams cover, and this is Detective number 394. And that's a pretty nice looking cover as well. Pretty happy to see that. It looks like it's in really fine shape. This is $3.94, so yes, this was $7, and it's listed as a very good. I'll have to see the back. It's pretty difficult to determine, unless it has water damage. Seems a little bumpy there, but he doesn't actually give any kind of notes on exactly why these are graded the way they are. But actually, just looking at the cover of the bag, it looks just as good. It looks like a fine or very fine. So it's a little bit hard to determine. But it does feel potentially like there's a little water damage there, and there's tiny little stain, so that may have held it back. And let's take a look at this issue. We're at $3.94. So okay, $3.94, and this one's listed at very good. And the very good issue that's listed on my comic shop is around $7, which I paid $7 for this. I would say it looks a little better than that, but I see a 6.0 at $22, and I see a very fine at $40. But either way, I like the issue. I like the cover. And once again, there's more to it than just the covers, because although it has pencils by Bob Brown, who was a solid artist, most of the only Bob Brown that I remember seeing, I think he did some Avengers, and I know he did some of the Champions, which is a really great series, but pretty relatively anonymous artist, at least in the Bronze Age. And but then you have another Frank Robbins and Gil Kane story with inks by Murphy Anderson. Murphy Anderson was pretty well known for doing Hawkman, also a very, very talented artist. And I love Gil Kane, as I've said many times. So getting a Gil Kane interior story and a Neal Adams cover, always worth. So pretty happy. And this is $3.92. Actually, I believe this is the first appearance of Jason Bard. Not that that's a big deal, but surprisingly for a character that is not particularly well known, he's got a thread running through detective for a long period of time and has actually done quite a lot. And even though he's just a kind of normal guy, a normal sort of detective, which is suitable for the title, of course. And yeah, this is again a $7 comic in terms of what I paid for it. I paid $7 for it, and it's listed in very good, and it actually looks like it has a little more damage than the prior one, but $3.92 is around a $20 comic. $20-25 for 6.0. Obviously if it was in better shape, probably go around $30, but $20 comic again for $7. Again, Neal Adams, and this one also has Bob Brown, Frank Robbins and Bob Brown story, and also has Frank Robbins, Gil Kane, and Murphy Anderson story. This is actually pretty interesting as well. Let's see if I can read this. In the opening story, Batman appears to have been killed in a watery fight with gangster Angles Moore, but Moore and his boss, Scap Scarpell, are plagued by ghostly reminders of Batman everywhere they go. Super Goof, a one-page story by John Costanza. Then there's another story, A Clue, 7 foot tall, script by Frank Robbins, pencils by Gil Kane, inks by Murphy Anderson, and that story is, on her way to work, Barbara Gordon spots a spectator of a mugging in Gotham Park. Later, when this individual shows up at the library, he introduces himself as criminologist Jason Bard. Finding his background in criminology interesting, she goes with him back to the scene of the crime, where he points out that the mugger must have been 7 feet tall. So, okay, once again, I'm a little bit, even though I don't usually go back and read these, I just go back usually to look at the art. I am intrigued as to how he came to the analysis that the mugger was 7 feet tall. That's pretty interesting. So that's an interesting little hook. And this is $3.91. Again, $7. And again, with Neal Adams cover, of course. It's pretty interesting. The most interesting aspect right here is that tombstone, which, of course, is shaped like Batman. You know, his cape with his cowl. And Jenny Jenkins, the gal most likely to marry Batman, and sadly to be Batman's widow, if you can see the very bottom there. It's the 1963 class prophecy. So this issue, $3.91. Again, Frank Robbins, Bob Brown, Joe Gaiella, and physical therapist and workout maven Tim Clark has fallen for Jenny Jenkins, but her boss, gourmet magazine editor and extortionist Arnold, comes between them. To make her see the light, Tim decides to impersonate Batman. I wonder if Tim gets himself killed as Batman. Strike is a script by Mike Friedrich, pencils by Gil Kane again, inks by Murphy Anderson. Robin, with the help of student reporter Craig Rockland, discover the truth behind the breakdown of talks between the teachers and the administration of the school, which is pretty amusing. This is the plot line for a detective comic story where Robin discovers the truth behind the breakdown of talks between teachers and the administration. Wow. Action-packed. I'm really interested in how that turns out as well, and to see how Gil Kane illustrates that. Okay, so this, turn back, move up forward a little bit, and this is Batman 359. Now, this I bought strictly for monetary reasons. Not that it's a big winner in terms of price, but it was only $5, and it was the follow-up issue to this. And if you by chance watch my previous video, I said I got this from the same dealer. I previously got a near mint copy of this, Batman 358, from the same dealer for $5. Here again, I get this, which I think is a very fine. At least he had it listed as very fine. I don't really see any flaws, but this was also listed as $5. This is the first full appearance of Killer Croc. So this is purely a monetary purchase. It's just too good a deal to pass up. I mean, it's a first full appearance of a major character, and it's not too often that you can find reasonably good key issues for $5. And this listed on my comic shop, a very fine is listed at $90. They have bids. They have an auction for $7.5, and so far it has 10 bids, and it's up to $30, and it still has 4 days left, so it will definitely go up. And then they have a couple of other copies, fine, very fine, for $69, a fine for $75, and a very good fine for $56. So the point being that this cost me $5. I can at least turn this around for $40, maybe. I would think easily. And and I may try to get more for it, because that will essentially defray most of the cost of this package. I mean, this entire package cost me $70 plus $8 shipping, so $78. So obviously, if I can, get $40 out of a $5 comic, I'm pretty much defraying the cost, a good portion of the cost, obviously not the entire cost. But plus, I still have a duplicate copy of this in near mint, which I also can sell, because I didn't buy these because I love the art. These have the cover is by Ed Hannigan. I like Ed Hannigan's work just fine, but this is not the most impressive cover in this run. And then that's why I bought this one, $3.59, essentially just because it's a follow-up. There's Killer Croc again, and yeah, the artwork is pretty unimpressive in terms of this is the first Dan Jurgens comics work. I've seen very little of Dan Jurgens because I wasn't reading comics through that period, and certainly not Dan Jurgens comics. But I remember when he took over Warlord, he's just a very pedestrian artist. And speaking of pedestrian, this was illustrated by Kurt Swan, another of my least favorite artists from the Bronze Age. Kurt Swan certainly did some good stuff when he was earlier in his career, but throughout the Bronze Age, I mean, he was mostly illustrating whatever Superman or Action Comics, and he was largely responsible for how incredibly bland and dull those comics looked. I mean, they just were. It was a very workmanlike, competent performance, but there was just nothing of real interest for those comic books, and they really, I just don't know what to say about them other than that they were just bland, and that's the word I most associate with Kurt Swan. I mean, it wasn't a beautiful simplicity like C.C. Beck, or, as I've mentioned, like a Mike Allred with a beautiful line, and or Paul Smith, who worked on X-Men with that beautiful clean line. It was just a sort of oatmeal style blandness that wasn't particularly my cup of tea, oatmeal or tea. So anyway, those were purchased purely for hopefully the flip 'em. And then here we go with one more Batman, 247, with a great cover. And let's see if I have that one pulled up. Yeah, I actually do. And really love this cover. And this is a story called Merry Christmas and a Deadly New Year by Denny O'Neil. Pencils by Irv Novak, who's always pretty good, and Dick Giordano. So, and again, this is, let's see what I paid for this. Batman 247. Okay, I paid $9 for this, and it is listed in Fine Plus. And there's some tape on the bag here, which kind of distorts it, but otherwise it does look like a Fine Plus. And okay, where was I? Right here. So this sells once again on my comic shop for $61 and very fine. 16 in fine, 6.5, 16 pretty much across the board, so the $61 is a very ambitious price, let's say. But if this is a $20 comic, it's certainly worth $9, and it's definitely a $20 comic, $15, $20 at the very least. So either way, I'm not losing anything on this. So take a look through these in a moment. Let's talk for a second about Neal Adams. Neal Adams has, of course, he's one of the legendary names of the Silver Age and the early Bronze Age. A big name artist, one of the most collectible artists, one of the most acclaimed artists throughout the 60s and 70s. Primarily at DC, but also he worked at Marvel doing Avengers and some amazing tales, and he created Havoc, who was one of the cooler designs for X-Men. But Neal Adams, I was watching an interview with him prior to doing this opening, and he claims that he's never left comics because he continues to do advertising work, often in a comics form, and that in fact pays far better, as well as he continues to do his own comic stuff. I think I showed a Miss Mystic that he, that was one of his own series in my Strange Ones video. And but honestly, every example he shows of the stuff that he's done recently, or that he's done since the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, is just incredibly garish and hideously colored, and every scintilla of the soul of the artwork just seems to be destroyed by computer coloring and computer effects, and that no reasonable artist of his abilities should be proud of. And it doesn't make me question Neal Adams' draftsmanship at all. I mean, he did a Deadly Hands of Kung Fu cover that was just a perfect portrait of Bruce Lee. That's still a beautiful thing, a work of just absolute beauty, and has done so many other great covers, and as well as some stuff that's been pretty overrated at times. But you look at stuff like this and stuff like this, it's very nice to look at, and obviously a very talented artist, but one who maybe seems to overestimate his impact on the comics form at this point, because he hasn't really done much of anything of note since the 70s. And I think if it makes me question his taste, because if you looked at his stuff in the 60s and 70s, if he looks at his stuff in the 60s and 70s, which he does all the time because he does signings, he appears at conventions all the time, it's kind of hard not to cringe if you compare this stuff to the stuff that he's currently doing. Not this. This is by Paul Pope, which I love, by the way. But, so Neal Adams really hasn't been a relevant creator since the 1970s, but he still has a very, very high opinion of himself, which is very entertaining in terms of interviews. I'm not really offended by his arrogance or his pomposity, but I am offended that he doesn't do better work now, that he doesn't sort of recognize that the coloring and all of the computer effects damage his work, and he doesn't get back to just being sort of classic Neal Adams. I'm not against his growth. I'm not against an artist evolving at all, but he's devolved. He hasn't evolved. But this is a 2014 interview with Zachary Petit. I'm just giving us a little something different to look at every now and then as I blather on. But and this is from Print Magazine, and Print is primarily a design magazine that has a minimal amount of comics coverage, but every now and then it does, and it's a pretty expensive magazine. I have a few issues. I don't know why. They're like $12 for a very slender magazine with a lot of ads, and I'm always kind of unsure how they stay in business, except, yes, they sell a lot of ads to chic illustration design companies and outfits or whatever that pay for glossy ads, so somehow they stay in business doing that. But Neal Adams said that if I get rejected, I just come back. Look, there's nobody within the comic business that's 5 years my junior or 5 years my senior. There's nobody in comics that's a contemporary of mine. They don't exist. There's 10 years of blank. So obviously I was a very stubborn, aggressive, positive person. You don't get to be somebody like me without being very, very tough. Okay? I mean, there's, a toughness, at least in his stance. Neal Adams, much to his credit, was very much an advocate for creators' rights, for royalties, for artists. And but once again, even when being interviewed about that, I watched the interview that Comicology did on video, and Neal Adams basically says that he's, you know, in one sense he's being humble. He says, I didn't do anything special. I was just a reasonable person, and the people in the business were essentially Neanderthals and were allowing themselves to be screwed like this. And I came in and said, look, creators deserve royalties. Creators deserve their original art back. So there's a toughness and there's a brashness in the sense that he was willing to take on the comics industry, which is a good thing. But otherwise, I'm not quite sure in what ways Neal Adams is tough. And then he goes on to say, I like Batman because I was able to bring him back to what he was supposed to be. I didn't change him. I just brought him back to what he was supposed to be, away from the campy nostalgia of the TV show and back to brooding. I created Havoc out of whole cloth, so that's pretty interesting. I took Green Arrow, who was a copy of Batman, and turned him into his own independent type character that you never saw before. So in effect, I created Green Arrow, yet I'm stuck with the fact that I only recreated Green Arrow. So I think he wants to get more credit for creating Green Arrow because he, you know, I guess in his mind he did what Neal Adams did to Kirby's Sandman and created a whole cloth character. I'm not sure. For Green Lantern, I didn't do anything except make him the character that Gil Kane created and saved him from obscurity. And then I created John Stewart in the early 70s, who is a black Green Lantern. And I gave a character for black American kids and kids around the world to look up to, which I suppose is admirable. It goes on to, there's an edition, this is from Print magazine. There is, in that same interview, he goes on to say that he's had grown black men come up to him at conventions and cry because he created John Stewart. How many times that happened, whether it was once or more than once, who knows? I assume that it actually happened. It sounds a bit far-fetched, but at the same time, comics fans are a pretty unstable lot, so perhaps it meant that much to somebody. On being a legendary comics artist, this is pretty good. He says, it's like being a movie star without being recognized on the street. It's pretty good. When I come to conventions, they treat me like I'm something, and they get all flustered and sweaty, and that's what they do with actors. But when I go out on the street, nobody knows who I am. So I have the best of all possible worlds, because who the hell wants that? Meaning, who the hell wants to be recognized everywhere you go? He can just be the star and make everybody sweaty and excited and flushed when he's in a comics convention, but go back to anonymity when he's out on the streets. So I'll go into this one little bit here too as well on Jason Bard. Created by Frank Robbins, best known to the Bronze Age fans as the sort of quirky artist of Invaders, which I said before. But here Robbins is just a writer, so he created Jason Bard, and Jason Bard is listed as a capable fighter, criminologist, and marksman. As a young boy, Jason Bard vowed to exact revenge on his father, who had murdered his mother. However, Jason did not know who his father was, as his mother had destroyed all of the pictures that she had of him. So that must have been a bad breakup. This would make finding his father very difficult. After giving up on his quest for revenge, Bard joined the Marines and was deployed to Vietnam. While in Vietnam, he received a crippling injury to his right knee. He left the service and attended college on the GI Bill, majoring in criminology. Jason utilized his degree and opened a private investigations office in Gotham City. Interesting place to be a detective, where he earned a reputation for being an intelligent and ethical private investigator. He briefly worked together with Kurt Langstrom, the Man-Bat, which is pretty good. Bard's services have been used by Batman on several occasions, and he also became a professional acquaintance of Commissioner Gordon. Jason became very close to Barbara Gordon, and the two dated for some time, during which time she occasionally worked alongside her alter ego. He occasionally worked alongside her alter ego, Batgirl. In fact, it was a Batgirl story that Bard first appeared in 1969, which I have right here. During this first adventure with Barbara, Batgirl, his war disability was emphasized as he was occasionally incapacitated when his knee would give out. Something that happens to me because of a torn ACL, but it's in my left knee, not my right. And Detective 404, which I actually already discussed, that's where he's found accused of murdering an X-rated film director named Billy Warlock. So that's 404. Let's find that and crack that open. Of course, it's the last one I look at. It's right in front of me. Oh yeah. I think I will have to rebag these. And this is 404, as I said. Okay, it feels really nice. It's really nice and flat, really nice and smooth. It does have a little strange bit of damage there and there, a little bit of discoloration, if you can see. Discoloration here, it's pretty obvious, and then over here. So the back cover, not quite as nice, but really nice copy actually. Actually looks just as good out of the bag as it does in the bag. And this new camera setup is not as good for showing the interiors, but you can see some of Neal Adams' artwork. I think this is one of the few that I got where he actually did the interiors. But that's fine because the other ones have Gil Kane, so you can't go wrong. Let's see if we can... Oh, okay, well... Wow, that's a really nice looking panel and page. And here we go right here, a tribute to the great Joe Kubert and Robert Kanigher, who, of course, created Enemy Ace. But really entertainingly, Gil Kane, who was in the same issue, said Robert Kanigher was a really rotten person, that he was a really mean guy to the artist and bullied the artists, even his favorite artists like John Severin, Russ Heath. That's Gil Kane's opinion. And unfortunately, Gil Kane has passed away. Robert Kanigher has passed away. So, but Gil's pretty forthright, so I kind of trust his remembrance of things. Not that it's really any of my business. It's just entertaining hearsay. And some really nice stuff from Gil Kane. Don't really get what happened with the whole killing of the X-rated film director thing. And this is 404. I'm sorry, 416. We just looked at 404. It's the back cover. Again, a nice copy. And, okay, this is news to me. So the artwork is actually by Frank Robbins as well. A lot of these he's just listed as a writer. And Frank Robbins has such a strange style. He was certainly influenced by Noel Sickles and particularly by Milton Caniff. And actually, I like how odd it really is. Odd faces, odd figures, and odd poses with unusual lighting effects, but effective. I would say he's actually maybe better suited for Batman than he was for the Invaders, and I grew to like the Invaders stuff now. I certainly didn't when it came out. So that's interesting as well. And then there are some reprints in some of these. I would like to get some of the 52-page issues. This is a 48-page issue, so... and this is kind of interesting as well. This is art by Don Heck. Pretty pedestrian there. But Don Heck was really well known from the Marvel period as well. I think Iron Man, some Avengers, some Incredible Hulk. It's actually pretty nice looking work. Sometimes these artists peaked in the Silver Age, and as they were getting older, you may have only seen their stuff as I did in the Bronze Age and were not too impressed, and then you go back and see stuff that they did in their prime and it's actually a lot better, and you get why they were more popular and used so often. Anyway, see if there's any other issues. All of them are interesting, but cut this short soon. Let's take a look at $392 Detective. And again, what's with the Aurora Frankenstein glow in the dark? This is an ad by the same people, but it's a different ad, so stuff must have been selling. This one is, again, these covers feel really nice, but this one has quite a bit of bending, creasing along the spine. It's not too bad, but up here at the very top, it's pretty bumpy, which probably gives it a very good, but still actually feels like a really nice copy. And this is a Bob Brown art. Again, I don't think it's going to blow anybody away, but at the same time, you know, it's a nice page. Don't recognize any of these names. And then on the letters page, then there's a pretty strange little funny comic there, Super Goof, which apparently is by John Costanza, who is far and away best known, I think, as a letterer. I don't believe a colorist. And let's see if this had a bit. Yeah, this had a Gil Kane story as well, and this is also interesting. One of these had Alex Toth, or a couple of these had Alex Toth, which is another big selling point. But I don't think that was Alex Toth. But anyway, this is Gil Kane and Murphy Anderson. Again, script by Frank Robbins. Nice stuff from Gil Kane. And this is, I guess this is Jason Bard here, who walks with a cane because he has a bad right knee from being injured in the Vietnam War, but the girls like him. He's a stylish, charming dude, and he's a criminologist. And as drawn by Gil Kane, he's a pretty handsome guy. And Gil draws some pretty nice looking women as well. He didn't have the Jack Kirby curse of not being able to draw women. Of course, Kirby could draw sometimes, but some of those women, yikes. Pretty broad-shouldered. So there we go. Really nice to see some early Gil Kane stuff from DC. Of course, when I say early, Gil Kane was, I believe, working as early as the very late 40s as a teenager. And then he was working through the 50s. And when he got to Marvel, he was just doing tons and tons of work. Aside from all the covers, he was doing his own graphic novels. And tons of covers. Sometimes he was working at Marvel and DC at the same time. You know, he was dealing with a divorce, which I guess was costing him through the nose, so he was constantly having to work, and that's unfortunate. One of the great artists in comics. But the benefit is we have all of this, selfishly, we have all of this work. It's great work from Gil Kane. And once again, the Bernie Wrightson cover that we've already seen, and that's pretty much it for the unboxing and for Detective Batman Batch. As I said, once again, $70 for all of these. You can tell me if you think they're worth. I feel like they were, and I like the comics a lot. I'm happy to add them to my collection. So that's pretty much it, and I'll see you next time with either another unboxing or something else. Thanks for watching, and by all means, once again, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Goodbye.